talked about. Well, we had a couple of games, didn't we? How many games do we have today, Scotch?
We had 5 games today for the tournament. So,
That's awesome.
yep. We had
How far how far into the tournament are you guys now?
we had this is round 2. And you know what? I have it up because I was going to transition to this real quick. But here, let's switch to tournament sheet. We're through round 2, and we had a tie earlier today, so that was interesting.
Cool.
We had
Oh
a
yeah.
10-1 game in the Ancient Era,
Oh my
so
gosh. Yeah, the Wanderers are rolling.
so that's cool. And everybody's going to be back tomorrow to battle it out.
Cool. Well, I'll keep an eye on it. I can't wait to see who wins.
Yep. So
Well, before we get into it, I just wanted to say thank you everybody for being here, not just for the con and for this talk, but also just like for hanging out on the Discord. This is like one of my favorite places to spend time on the internet. It is an extreme honor to have you guys here playing this silly game and hanging out and talking about it and arguing about it and pushing me to make it better, which you guys always do, because if it weren't for y'all, I would have stopped developing this game after Draft 1 in 2017. So it means a heck of a lot to have you guys here, and I hope you are all having just half as much fun as I am.
Oh,
Um,
it's been a lot of fun.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear it. But yeah, so I don't have anything prepared. I just want to talk to you guys, and you can ask me questions, and then I'll probably have some questions for you too, because I want to get some feedback as I'm thinking about like what I'm going to do for Deadball this year. Um, but yeah, do you guys want to kick it off with some questions for me?
yeah, we could go through the list that was sent over before the con started. So we can
Yep.
start there. Um, Hold on, making sure that I have all the record. I'm trying to make sure that we do get this recorded
Cool. What
accurately.
drink did I prepare? I ended up going for some Earl Grey tea in my dead ball mug. And I'm happy to go camera on if you guys want to see me talking.
That is a okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
Sure. So, I'm actually here. I'm not a robot. Here's my dead ball mug. I felt like it was appropriate. My kids have been pills this afternoon, which, had me tempted by some booze, but I decided that a nice cup of tea would probably be a better decision.
We still got a lot of night left for those who are
I
planning
was
on
about to say,
playing.
we'll see where we are in an hour. Who knows?
uh,
My wife is handling bedtime solo, so hopefully they will be nice to her.
no.
Well, thank Mrs. Akers for us. This is awesome that you could
I
I
will.
I heard mine
be
yell
here.
twice already, so it sounds like things are going south here. But
Right? Do they want to come hang out with my guys? That would be ideal.
yeah,
They could cancel each other out.
we'll do that. Yeah, we'll do that later. By the way, everybody, there is a request to speak option, and we only have, there's only, about a dozen of us here. So if you want to
Yeah,
do
you guys
that,
are all welcome to talk.
we can bring people up. But if not, let me see where those questions are hiding, and we can start off with some of those. Um, okay. All right. So questions. So the first one that came in was how do you balance the ease of gameplay with the accuracy of representing the game of baseball?
Well, that's like been a thing that's been on my mind sort of since day one. And I have always slanted toward ease of gameplay. I mean, you guys have heard me talking in like the rules questions channel and stuff like that about that. Like anytime it comes down to a choice between like being more accurate at the expense of like complication, I will usually side on like simplicity just because partly just because that's how I think. I like a simple game. I like a fast-paced game. I always intended this to be a very fast-paced game. The fact that it models reality so well is really just like dumb luck in a lot of ways. The fact that baseball's like most well-known statistic, batting average, happens to track so neatly onto a 100-sided die is the reason that this game worked in the first place. That was the first thing that I thought of when I was thinking of it, and I was like, oh, this might actually work. I bet I could do something with this. And so everything else was built on top of that. And that was enough to give it the feeling of baseball, even if it wasn't 100% accurate. We've had arguments before about like, well, how accurate is batting target because it fails to take into account like this, that, or the other thing. The same way that people argue about how useful batting average is, because I think most of us on here know that batting average is far from the be all end all. But it's also a very evocative statistic, and it's something that has a lot of meaning in baseball history, which is why I was happy to tie the game to it. When I am thinking about new rules, I'm always coming from a point of like what will make the game more fun, what will clarify problems that people have, like questions that people have that come up a lot, and just like what will streamline it. So I don't think about new rules until I'm playing the game and I'm rolling the dice and I find myself pausing for a moment because I'm like, oh, I'm not sure exactly what's supposed to happen here. That's the time when I think like, okay, this needs a rule. Like, does this runner advance in this situation? That's the thing that we were talking about a couple of weeks ago. And that's something that I hope to be able to clarify in the next edition whenever I get around to that. But except for that, I'm like not worried about it because as far as I'm concerned, the game feels like baseball, which is all I've ever wanted. Um, as far as like pure accuracy goes, I leave that to y'all. Um, I think that's something that's better to homebrew in, because, well, partly because I'm just like not super interested in like being extremely accurate, but also because I'm always trying to think of like making the game as approachable as possible for the new player. And I know when you are new to something, like the simpler the rules seem, the easier it is to like get acclimated to it. So I'm always trying to make sure that things feel very accessible. Which is why, in the second edition, I placed a big emphasis on that. That's why like the whole first chapter, like it's got the introduction to like what even is baseball. It's got the your first inning thing, which is supposed to serve as like a tutorial. And that was really my goal with that, is to make it as easy as possible for people who don't know anything about it, but are like thought the cover looked cool to pick it up and learn the game that way. Um, I have something else to say there. Um, anyway, yeah, that's basically it. The like I always slant toward accessibility and approachability. Oh, this was the other thing I was going to say was, so a lot of the experience that I got learning how games work and how to explain games to people was in the years before I made Deadball, and also for a little while afterwards. I had a really terrific like weekly role-playing game group in Brooklyn where I lived at the time. And the people that I was playing with, almost none of them had any gaming experience. It was a lot of actors. It was people, like in tech, but just like people who were friends of mine who I'd known for a long time. And none of them were interested in complicated rule sets. None of them really cared about accuracy. They wanted a game that was like super fast to learn and fun to play. And I know the face that those people would make when I got into like the 10th minute of explaining the rules of a new game, and that face is and so when I started developing games, my goal is always to present the rules in such a way that it helps people avoid making that face. Which is why simplicity to me has always been more important than like stone cold accuracy, even though I think I love it that like people on here are like always striving to make the game more accurate. I've always thought of Deadball as slanting more toward like beer and pretzels than like hardcore statistical simulation, but I love that it can serve both masters.
Yeah. Um, so next up was what is your general design process and how do you overcome challenges in that process? And I think specific here would be pretty cool to hear too for everybody of something that
That's a,
really tripped you up in the design for Deadball.
all right. So one of the first big challenges I had was after the first Deadball Kickstarter. I had promised to make Deadball 1909 as like a supplement that was like a stretch goal. Which in and I my original idea for that was going to be like, this is going to be 2 pages long. But then I quickly realized that in order to properly evoke like the feeling of the ancient game, which it turns out is like my favorite version to play in, and it's like the part that I'm like most emotionally connected to. In order to do that, I was like, oh no, I have to literally rewrite the entire rule book from scratch. So doing that as a free stretch goal was a terrible decision. But I was, still sort of figuring out how I did all that stuff at the time. But I remember it was such a fun challenge to try to figure out like, okay, so I have this game that works pretty well for like modern day baseball. How do I recreate old-timey baseball? And my approach to that was the way that I've approached a lot of new Deadball stuff, which is a combination of like doing sort of light statistical research and just figuring out like flavor stuff because especially for something like the ancient era, it's like I knew that I wanted it to be accurate, but it also had to feel the way that we imagine old-timey baseball to be. So like it wasn't just enough that like, well, these numbers match up. If it doesn't feel like, dudes standing out there in baggy flannel uniforms and the infield is mud and the ball is like falling apart in your hands. Like I really wanted to kind of try to bring that to life a little bit with those rules. And I think that when I was so I did a so but for that like I started with a lot of looking at the numbers, and Fangraphs is really great for this because you can export like huge tables of numbers from different eras, broken down in like a million different ways. They've got a million different statistical columns that you can look at. And so I just like tried to make them as simple as I could and just look at basically the first thing I figured out was the hit table. Like what are the main differences between like a game of baseball in 1909 versus 2017? And essentially what I learned was like it's a lot of singles. Like batting average doesn't really change, walk rate doesn't really change. ERAs are a little bit lower, but basically it's just like dudes hitting singles. And what's cool is that as soon as I created that new hit table for that, I was like, oh, this is going to totally change the game because it's like it just becomes so hard to score runs. And suddenly it feels like every runner on base is just like trapped in molasses because they're moving so slowly around the diamond, which suddenly did evoke that like muddy infield thing that I was going for. And so that meant that risky plays, like small ball type plays, like bunting and stealing and the hit and run, which I invented for Deadball 1909, all of that stuff became much more important because scratching out a single run in the ancient era is like a huge deal, unless you are that team that scored 10 runs earlier today. And, who knows, what kind of tobacco juice they're putting on their balls. But so for that, I led with the numbers, and then I had like that led me into a thing where I was like, okay, cool. And that created all kinds of problems. So I'm like, all right, small ball is going to be a bigger deal here. How can I make those small ball plays feel more alive, feel more interesting? And so that's when I introduced stuff like the altering bunting to make it like a little bit more of a better idea because I feel like it works better. In the ancient era, stuff like bunting for hit became more of a thing. Basically, just like adding in little things to give you extra incentives to like try to move guys around the bases and also to be, like put the manager in a place where they feel like they have more tools that they can use because if all you're doing is waiting around and praying that you get 4 singles in a row, that's going to be a pretty boring game. And so with that, it was like looking at the numbers and then trying to craft something that reflected the numbers, but then also adding in rules for flavor that would like work around what the numbers had shown me. And then for pitching in the ancient era, I knew that, that one's fun because like, you have in your head, if you are a baseball fan who cares about baseball history, you already have in your head an idea of what pitching is like in the ancient era. And basically it's just like dudes pitching forever. And then when I went look back and looked at the numbers, it was like dudes were pitching even more forever than is fathomable. Which is why the pitching rules are so favorable toward the pitcher in ancient era. Which is why, like, if a guy gets off to a good start, he can very easily pitch like 12 innings because guys just did that back then. And if you've read about it, it's because like they just didn't throw that hard, and so they could just go and go and go. And then they would pitch again like 2 days later. And so I had a lot of fun just like crafting that alternate rule set to reflect first reality and then also to reflect like the version of the game from that era that existed inside my head. And the result is something that is like almost alien. But the actual difference in the rules is enough that like it fits neatly on a quick reference. Because like the tables are only so different, but as soon as you start fiddling with the hit table, you end up with a totally different game.
I think that was cool, and it actually mimics a lot of what we were talking about with. For a handful of us, we're playing with ancient rules for the tournament right now, and it's the first time for a ton of people. And
Oh, cool.
yeah, that 10-0 game that was 7 singles in a row, and then a
Isn't
triple
that
of an
incredible?
air.
It just happens. Wait, so how's this working? So some people are playing modern era and some people are
This
playing ancient
this
era. How's
one's
that?
all ancient.
Oh,
It's
cool.
fresh teams. Uh,
Yeah.
Great.
all ancient
Most
era.
most people when they have been playing in these tournaments, and I assume in their own like leagues at home or their own games, they mostly are playing in the modern era, it seems.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, which makes sense that that's like the most common, and I sort of always figured it would be. Um, I like ancient era just because it's so darn fast.
Oh yeah.
I hate pitching changes, both in real life and in dead ball. Like, I hate it when the pitcher is so worn down that like I have to figure out like, all right, who's coming up? This is a left-hander. I love like being the ancient era manager and being like, you're down to minus D8. Like, I don't care. Keep pitching. Go. Just keep going. I don't care. Keep pitching. It's like I like the cruelty of it and the simplicity of it. I love that ancient era games actually do take less time, even if it's only a little bit less time than a modern era game, because at the end of it, you really feel like, oh, that was a 9 inning game that lasted an hour and 40 minutes or something like they used to back in the day. Um, so yeah, it works better for me. I like that the rosters are smaller because it makes league management a lot easier.
Oh yeah.
Um, when I'm doing updating the rosters for the Southern Circuit, I always do Modern Era first because it's sort of a bear. And then when I get to doing the Ancient Era, it's just like, oh, it's only 17 guys per roster. It goes so much faster. Um, it's what's funny is that where the Southern Circuit is now in like 1914, by then Major League rosters had expanded to 25, I think. But I'm going to leave that at 17 forever just because it makes my life a lot easier. And also, it's like it's already kind of a struggle to like find a use for the guys on the bench in the ancient era because it's like if the pitcher's not coming out, like I don't need to pinch hit. Maybe you pinch hit once in that game. But you're not swapping relievers in and out. So like there are dudes who just never get any use, which is why I like the talent on the bench rule when I play. But the idea of having a 25-man roster back then is just crazy. And I know what it just meant that they would like platoon a lot and pinch hit a lot. And like pinch run and like put in dudes for defense. So there was a lot of other stuff that they would do, but that wouldn't be actually fun in a gaming setup, I don't think.
We
Well, let
did.
alone finding 25 guys that want to play on your team.
Yeah, right.
For peanuts.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, for the $1,000 a year or whatever.
We did have in one of the games today. It was correct me if I'm wrong because I was watching on the scorecast, which is sometimes a little bit you don't always catch all the detail. But I think there was a double pinch hit in the game that went 11 innings.
Awesome. Meaning like I
They
put in my
they
right-hander, you switch your pitcher, then I switch my batter again. That?
some or no, it was they had to pinch hit
Oh,
multiple
multiple. Oh,
times
great. Awesome.
because
Yeah, I
they
mean
we
it's
figured
great when
out
you do it.
because we figured out in the rules like, oh, if this guy only throws 3 innings, I could just do that, or three outs, I could just do that.
Hmm.
And it
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah, that's like a
affect the
free,
team.
yeah, that doesn't count against
So,
you in ancient era.
all right, back to I'm gonna combine a couple of questions here,
Sure.
but uh, sort of advice for people creating TTRPGs or creating solo games.
Oh, cool. So first of all, do it. Do it as much as you can. Have a ton of fun. It's so fun. Um, So for TTRPGs, I mean, like the only game that I've ever finished creating that's a tabletop RPG is Comrades. And I have tinkered with two or three other games that have like never seen the light of day. Some that I got as far as like playtesting with that just didn't click. And so my first piece of advice is if you're working on something and it's not clicking and eventually you start to hate it, that probably means you should stop working on it and move on to something else. Because if you're not having fun with it at all anymore, like it's going to be hard to convince yourself that other people have fun with it. Now, that's not the same as when you are really, really committed and heavily in the middle of a project, because at that point you will find yourself hating it, hating it, hating it. But if you're committed to it and you know it's a good idea and you really believe in it, you have to keep going. Um, I heard a thing once that said like, do you hate what you're working on? Great, that means you're halfway done. And that's true in writing, that's true in all kinds of different disciplines. But so with Comrades, I had the advantage of working, it's a Powered by the Apocalypse game. So I knew it was based on a system that I knew really well, because as I was talking about earlier, I had spent a lot of time running games for my friends back in Brooklyn, and Powered by the Apocalypse is absolutely great for people who are wary of deep rule sets, but who like goofing off. It's and like because I was working with people, several of whom were actors or at least were like just theatrical types, and who had like that kind of background, they were very comfortable improving and did not like feeling like they had to memorize a ton of rules. I know that there are some people who find like a rules-light game like Powered by the Apocalypse to actually be really stressful because they rely on the rules to like make them feel comfortable and everything. But for the group that I was working with, PBTA worked really, really well. And so I learned that inside and out. I love the fact that like you can explain how a PBTA game works to somebody in like 3 sentences. Like it's simpler than Monopoly, which is a pretty good bar. So because I was working with a system that I knew, it made finishing my first finished RPG a lot easier because I knew that the foundations of what I was working on were really, really sound, and that I could push it really, really far without worrying about breaking it. I have tried to develop my own systems for RPGs like before and since, and it's difficult because you you have to reinvent the wheel in a lot of ways. Like just figuring out like, well, how does just like a basic role work? Like, what are my stats and stuff like that? And especially since at that point I didn't have like a ton of experience, it was a great comfort to know that I was working with something that just worked. So I would recommend if you are interested in developing a TTRPG to start with like by iterating on something that you already love and that you know how it works and that you have a cool idea for changing. So that could be like basing something on your favorite baseball dice game, which has like a very approachable license that will let you do whatever you want with it. Or it could just be, like taking a game whose system you really like and then just like skinning it for a new setting and just like adding in a few rules and then seeing how it plays. I think that like taking something that you already understand and then fiddling with it is the best way to learn how anything works, whether you're talking about something mechanical or like, an actual game. As far as solitaire games go, I think the best sign that a solitaire game is working is that you want to keep playing it all the time. I've told this story before, but I knew that Deadball was working well, there's two things. One was when I found that it was making me angry. I knew that was a good sign. Like if I was getting pissed off at the stuff that the dice were doing, I was like, oh wow, this game actually this is clicking. This feels like baseball because it's making me angry the way that baseball does. But then also like I was playing it all the time. This was before, oh no, I had a kid at that point. I had a young kid, and so I was bored. That was why I made Deadball in the first place. He was like 10 months old. And so I had a lot of time on my hands, or actually, that's not accurate. I had a lot of small chunks of time on my hands, would be perhaps more correct. And so I was, I had a lot of these like 20, 30-minute bits in the day when like the kid was distracted or he was eating or he was like blissfully asleep. That two-nap lifestyle is incredible. And if you've got a kid in that stage right now, savor it because man, they give up that second nap so fast. Oh, um, but so I was playing it all the time. And my wife said to me at some point, you need to figure out a way to monetize this because you're doing it all the time. And I was like, I guess I am. And so if you have a solo game that you want to play a lot, that's a really good sign. Um, I have developed solo games that I haven't pursued or tried to finish because after I get through like the initial joy of like coming up with the foundational rules, I find that actually playing them is a chore. That's why I was never able to get the Top Flight, the soccer game that I worked on off and on for years, to a place where I felt like releasing it in any more than like a very, very bare bones beta stage because it was like every time I sat down at the table to try to play it, I was like, ugh, this. And that stinks. So like if you really hate working on it, then like probably you should, figure out why you hate it and fix it or move on to a different project. Um, as far as like practical general advice for game development goes, pick a couple of friends whose opinions you trust, and ask them to test it for you. Uh, there are different ways to do that. I have been most successful with getting games play tested when I am asking people for very, very specific feedback. So like when I made Lost Ship, I had a couple of things that I wanted to know about it, mainly to do with balancing and like length of game and stuff like that. And so I made a Google Forms survey that I sent to the 4 or 5 people who'd agreed to look at it. And it was just questions like, how long did your game take? How many rounds did you go through? Like, what was the end result? Stuff like that. Stuff that has like a definitive answer. It makes people it makes it a lot easier for people to like give you feedback when you're asking very specific questions, as opposed to just like, how'd you like it? Because if you just say, how'd you like it? They'll be like, it was great. And then you didn't learn anything and you wasted your friend's time. So and I would keep your number of playtesters like limited, especially at the beginning. Um, Go in with like really, really specific things you're trying to learn it, and then address it, and then move on to another round of playtesting with those same people or with other people. But I know people who have, when they're developing games, they will send it to like tons of people, and I don't recommend that with game development. I don't recommend that with fiction because I feel like you end up with too many voices in your ear. And you're better off having just a few people who you really, really trust, and then, like, most importantly, like trusting your own gut. Um, so, get enough feedback that you feel like you can confirm what you're seeing, but mostly trust your own impulses because you know the game better than anybody else, and it's more important to you than it is to anybody else.
As another designer, all of that, yes, times a million. Uh,
Yeah, do you have any other thoughts there? I mean, like what would you say if somebody asked you that question?
uh, a lot of the same things about, just start doing it, except that you have an idea. Um, the two of us could probably talk for a billion years about Powered by the Apocalypse and other RPGs because I have different experiences with it. And
Oh, tell
don't,
me about it.
I find it actually to be a bit. I don't know. I have to sort of discern myself because whenever I sit down to look at a PT powered by system, I'm not very. I'm like, this is awkwardly clunky, and it has a lot of weird rules in places that I don't want rules.
Hmm.
Um,
That can happen. Some of them are not very well made.
yeah. So
Yeah, some of them, yeah, it's like even games that I've really, really enjoyed playing
yeah,
that are PBTA, I do feel like people bolt on extra stuff that you don't need, or there will be stuff they put on because it's like, well, other PBTA games have this, so I guess I'll need to name it my own thing and then use it just because like it's in other ones. Um, like Dungeon World has got a lot of that. I don't
that's
know if you've
something
ever
that
looked at Dungeon World.
yeah. Um, if I'm gonna add on to that, because you just brought up, I'm doing this because other ones do it. I have a mantra that I use whenever I'm looking at games. That's no defaults, and that is when I
Mm.
sit down and look at what I want to put in the game. I really question: Am I putting this in because other games like this have it, or am I putting this in because I think this would be interesting? And even if I'm like, yeah, I'm just putting this in because other games have it and people are going to expect it, that's fine. But giving yourself that, you're going to find yourself not doing as nearly as much work. Uh,
Hmm.
Being like, oh yeah, I guess I don't need whatever it is I was going to add. So uh, that is one thing I would potentially add. Using your own system. I've also sort of tried to build a lot of RPG systems, and very recently said, screw it, I'm working in Cairn, which is a small D20 game that I'm going to deal with. Related to all this RPG talk, though, when you bounced off of it, and some people are going to, or have been doubling back, uh, the RPG mechanics that were in the original Deadball or 1909, are they ever coming back, or are they ever going to get revamped, or is that for the community
What do
now?
you mean? Like the 5 tool system, like that stuff?
I think that's what they were referring to here. Well, or I mean, Riki, if you want to come up and ask, that is a okay too.
Yeah, please.
Uh, okay with that, I will invite you to speak.
You're invited. You're welcome. We're happy to have you.
Heyo, howdy there.
Hey.
It is, I will say first off, it is a wonder to meet you, sir. I very
Thank you.
much
It's a wonder
enjoy
to meet
your
you
game.
too. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out the light so I can lean back in my chair. That's okay.
I'm gonna be a little
Uh,
mean and step in if we all take 20 minutes to say we appreciate this game so much when we start
right,
talking.
right.
We're gonna
Don't
be here
worry.
till the end of
Don't
the
worry.
game.
Don't worry. I just wanted to throw that brief amount of
Thank you.
respect in first.
Thank you. I
But
appreciate it.
yeah, no, I was indeed referring to the five tool system because I remember when I first like got the game and I looked at it, I saw that system and I went like, "Ooh, that's actually pretty good." I really like the idea of like doing a sort of career mode sort of thing of like
Mhm.
doing like an RPG sort of thing where you get a bunch of friends together and you say like, "Okay, you're a center fielder, you're a left fielder, you're playing you're getting drafted by like the Yankees during like their Slaughterhouse Nine era. Do your work." Like I think when I actually came to the Discord here, I mentioned like something akin to that, like an idea that I was doing with my pals. Those that would like use the general system, then evolve into using the five tool system as we shift the timeline into the 90s. And naturally, I got the second edition and I saw that the five tool system kind of got like, well, not exactly erased, but sort of like pushed off. And I was just kind of wondering if we'd possibly ever see like a revamp of that system or like some sort of fixing up of it, because I really like the idea of it. I really dig it a lot.
So
At
the
any rate.
five tool system was a thing that I came up with, and I put it in the book mostly just because I thought it was really cool. And like you said, I love the idea of having like a creative player mode because anytime I've ever played sports video games, like I love the creative player mode. It's so fun to start off crummy and in the minor leagues and like work your way up. Like that sort of thing is really popular for a reason. So I like the idea of trying to work in a dead ball. And I made it, and I felt like the description of it in the book was kind of tortuous. Like actually explaining it was difficult. And I never heard from a single person who used it, which is why I didn't. And I never really messed with it anymore because it turned out that just running a league is like a lot more work than I think I realized. So never mind having like players who were themselves like lots of work. I do love the idea. If I were to revisit it, which at the moment I don't have any plans for it, but I've got a list that I'm always adding to of like vague ideas for Deadball stuff in the future. If I were to go back to it, I would probably make it less crunchy and more sort of narrative based. I don't know how that would work off the top of my head, but it would probably have like a lot of sort of flavor tables and oracles and stuff like that, more than being all about like those numbers.
Yeah, like
Um,
something that would make it more like based around like, oh hey, you got friends, you're traveling around the country and sort of
yeah,
having experiences.
probably what I would do is, and this actually would be fun, um, would be to turn it into a like almost like a solo journaling game.
Hmm.
So it's not so much like it's not like everything that you do has like mechanical impact, but more that it is giving you prompts for like letting you tell the story of this like minor league player. And then there could be like a few tables that you'd roll on maybe at the end of each season or at the end of each like month or something that could have mechanical impact, but mostly it would just be like flavor stuff. Something like that could be fun. And have you guys ever read You Know Me, Al, the Ring Lardner novel about baseball from like I don't know, 1910s?
No.
Well, y'all should. It's hilarious. It's like one of the funniest books about baseball ever written, but it is letters being written by a very dumb, like, I think pitcher, as he's like bouncing around the league to his friend, who's back home. And something like that would be an interesting model for like sort of a solo journaling baseball game. So I'll put that on my list. No time soon. If
Uh,
anybody else wants to make it in the meantime, go ahead.
yeah,
Well,
But yeah, I
no,
think if I were to revisit something like that, yeah, I think I would keep it rules light and like narrative heavy.
it would absolutely be a wonderful thing, and I would love you forever for it. Alternatively, Alternatively, if it ever gets desperate, if it ever gets like down horribly, then like I could try and synthesize something because there is another system that sort of like brims into that sort of like on and off sort of like sports thing, and it's funny enough also powered by the Apocalypse system. It's the Worldwide Wrestling
Oh
system.
yeah. I love that game, and that's a game that I have never actually run, but I've read the book, and I've corresponded with the developer, who was a guy I used to kind of know on Twitter back when Twitter was a thing. Um, but that game is I think an exceptionally good example of a PBTA game, along with Monster Hearts. I think are like the two best examples of that form. Um, it's such a really rich balance
It
of
is
like
very good.
the way that game like feeds the mechanics into the mechanics into the narrative is like so artfully done.
Yeah, no, it's like
And
butter.
yeah, I'm like not a wrestling guy. None of my friends are wrestling people. I respect it. I think I'm in some ways I'm surprised I'm not a wrestling guy because it is my kind of thing. But yeah, if like there were like when I first read the game, I was like, God, I wish my friends were into wrestling. I wish I knew enough about wrestling to like do this. It's been a while actually thinking about a doing a game based on Worldwide Wrestling where the players are like characters on a reality competition show. Um, I think that would have a similar sort of like you'd have to like strike the same balance between like reality and kayfabe and like the the ways that what's happening on screen feed into what's happening backstage and all
So are
that.
you telling me that
But
we have an idea here for a bachelor RPG?
I've thought about it. I never got around to it. It's just an idea. It's one of hundreds that I have lying in like note stocks in places on my hard drive. That's
Listen,
another one.
We don't talk about that place.
If somebody wants to go and make it, you are welcome to. I would love
well,
to play
Yeah.
it.
it's funny that you talk about that because I literally
Feels and
have in
feels.
my like minor league supplement I'm working on. It's called Stories from the Minor Leagues, and I'm
Mhm.
trying to work on that right now. But I didn't know how to quite do it. But now you say solo journaling, I'm like that makes a lot of sense. I do that a lot
Yeah.
on my own anyway.
Yeah, yeah, you should look at some solo journaling games like the ones that I looked at when I was making Letters to the Stars because the fun thing about those kinds of systems like the way that Iron Sworn and like Starforged work is that like they because it's a solo game and because it's like a journaling game, it offloads a lot of work onto the player in a way that the player expects and is kind of grateful for. So it doesn't have to like it can be very, very not crunchy or chewy, as Biggest Boy says. Um, so like, yeah, I think it's a cool form. I had a lot of fun. like a lot of fun last year making Letters to the Stars and like figuring out like just how much crunch do I need for this to actually feel like a game while still giving the player like lots of room to, just like make up a story. Because really that was the whole point of that game was just giving somebody just enough incentive to make up a story with enough rules around it so that the story always feels like terrifying and like they're on the brink of disaster. So yeah, like that kind of thing, I think would be a really cool format for baseball stories.
Either way, I have funny enough actually GM'd with the WWW2E system before, and like I I'd say that I've played it enough times that I have like decent experience with it.
Hmm.
So like,
So it plays as good as it reads.
yeah, no. So like, well, that and also just like, I mean, hey, if you ever get the free time and like that mood for wrestling comes back, you can always hit me up and
I will keep that in mind. Thank you.
yeah.
Yeah, I fall in about once a year. I will fall into like a really deep wrestling hole on Wikipedia, and I've never watched wrestling like not since I was a kid. But once in a while, I'll just be like, and because like the Wikipedia stuff about wrestling, like all Wikipedia pages about like hobbies, are just hilariously detailed. So like you could spend forever reading about like the Attitude Era on Wikipedia and like those pages. Every single page related to it is longer than the Wikipedia pages for some countries.
I had a friend once
Yeah,
tell
that
me either you have to accept that wrestling is real or accept that Broadway is not the biggest live theatrical performance in the United States.
I mean, I know a lot of theater people who are also wrestling heads. Like those two things feed into each other very nicely.
Um,
Absolutely.
a lighter question here. We have what was the first game that you ever designed for either sale or your own personal use?
When I was a kid, I loved coding on my TI-83. And I would make games in math class because you could fiddle with your TI-83 and it would look like you were listening. And I remember making like I remember a few games I made. One was I made a game um, that was based on it was like War, the card game War, and I I made it as a joke because once you deal out a hand of War, like the player has no input. It's just you just flipping cards, and then eventually it's over, which is why it's a great game for kids. And so I thought that was funny, and so I wrote a game where first I wrote it where you just pressed enter over and over, and eventually you would win or lose. And then I wrote a game. I took out the part where you had to press enter, so you just press it once, and then your T83 would be crunching numbers for sometimes quite a while, and then it would just say like you won or you lost. So that was like one of the first games I ever made. And then I remember also I made so I was like a lot of kids, I had a Dungeons and Dragons manual and nobody to play it with.
Yep.
I think that that's like a fundamental state of being like a young nerd is like having this thing and it looks really cool and you don't get to play it because you need four friends who are able to come to your house whenever you want and you can't make that happen. And so I used what I guess would have been like third edition rules. And I made like a very simple like monster fighting game on my T83. It was all text based, obviously, but it would just like, where you'd have your armor class and all that stuff, and you'd like go through it and you could fight. And I remember I took the notes on it while I was making it in Sharpie on the inside of my family's Scrabble set. And so for like over a decade after that, like you'd open up the Scrabble set and there'd be all these weird random notations about for like a game that I made when I was in seventh grade. Um, so those were the earliest games I ever made.
I agree with Jaylee here that this was the original version of Baldur's Gate 3. I don't think we need to go any further.
And I think I probably made that game because I was really into Baldur's Gate 2. Like I
that would
loved that game.
that would do it.
I mean, it's one of the best video games ever. I still haven't played Baldur's Gate 3. I will at some point. Um, it just seems like a commitment.
Or you could just play D&D.
Or I could just play D&D. But yeah, I mean, like you said, there's a sweet spot, and I feel like I wish that I'd been into RPGs when I was like a freshman in college. When you have like there are just like hundreds of people in your building and you could get a game together and play whenever you wanted. But I went to college in New York, and so we were all into going to the one bar that didn't card. So I guess I can't argue with that. But I feel like that is the moment when you have like that captive audience, and then man, it gets harder when like the older you get to get folks together.
There are a
Oh yeah.
couple of people here. It's a kids issue that you can't find enough people to play D&D.
Yeah. Well, now it's a having kids issue.
Yeah, we yeah, that's something that um, I know we've talked about before on the subreddit of trying to get the kids to sit down and play a little bit of
Yeah,
any
I would love to
any
hear if anybody
system.
wants to talk about tabletop gaming with their kids, because it's a thing that I've been thinking about a lot. We're
Um,
reading a book right now where the characters are playing D&D, and I'm pretty sure that it's going to make my kids want to play D&D. And we've experimented with playing RPGs in the past and have never gotten more than like one or two sessions in. But my
I
oldest is 8 now, so I feel like he's getting close.
I work
my
in schools and I have run like D&D clubs before.
Cool.
It's pretty awesome, honestly.
I mean,
It's a
it's
lot
the
easier at the middle school and like up to the middle school age and then beyond, but like before that it's very possible too. I played D&D like a superhero version like Marvels with a kid that was like 4 years old.
it's
And
so
it was like
great.
45
I
minutes, but like it was
yeah,
awesome.
I don't have
That's
my
perfect.
camera today, but right next to me I have a set of dice that are definitely my oldest daughters and definitely my sons, who they would flip out if I were to they were to see me using them. Uh,
That's
and
wonderful.
that was one of the shocking things is how quick they do pick up on it.
Mhm.
I've been using Cairn. If you haven't checked it out, is a
Yep.
fantastic. It's the pitch is all the fun of D&D, but in 24 pages.
Cool.
It's a really fascinating little system, and I used it to run a DCC camp, a little DCC adventure,
Mhm.
and uh, kids will surprise you. That my
Oh,
son ended
sure.
up in a. He realized he was in a cave full of alligators and was like, "Okay, I need to be quiet now, right?" And I'm like, "Yes,
That's great.
that would be what to do." Okay, I want to sneak
Yeah,
over here, and
Jaylee does want to chat, by the way.
yeah. Oh, I'll invite Jaylee up. Absolutely.
Please come say hi.
Gotcha.
Hello. I'm probably on a potato microphone right now with my telephone, so
It works.
please
Don't worry about it. I can hear you.
make a few comments. First, I'm going to dull out my respects to Mr. Akers. Thank you very much for your game and the amount of obsession and compulsion that I've channeled into it over the past couple of years. I've learned a lot about baseball. Certainly appreciate it. As a parent of a 10-year-old going on 11, it has been kind of a challenge to find things that she would be interested in playing. She loves video games. She loves reading. But the one success I had is if you are familiar with The Warriors, which is
Oh,
a
Like the movie?
novelization by someone going by the pen name Aaron Hunter, which I believe is a collection of authors. And it's about cats and these sort of
Oh,
plans that they have. And way back in the back of one of these books, they had made their own little like RPG slash
cool.
adventure type thing. And I stumbled across it because my wife is usually the one that grabs the books for my daughter. And I stumbled across this. It's like, oh my God, I've got to try this. So I had to give myself a crash course in this, young, like, I don't want to call it young adult, but like this child series about cats in the wilderness, doing watership down type things.
That's so fun.
And then, we did a session of it and she absolutely adored it. So, for the parents out there, you have to find the thing that they like.
Yes,
Mhm.
my
It,
daughter, Magical Kitty Saved the Day. That was one that got her really interested. Same way, and we've been doing. And I'm probably gonna start working on it. Is she's been reading the Dragon Girls books and the Dragon Games books, which I'm excited because it's her first book that has a fantasy map in the front cover.
Ah,
Uh,
there's nothing better.
so I opened it up and saw that. I'm like, oh man, we're we're cooking now. And but yeah, absolutely. If it's a theme that they like,
Mhm.
I will have to check out a Warriors. So I've seen the
if
book.
if you are looking for like something for younger kids, No Thank You Evil is spectacular.
Ooh,
That's
I'll look
another
that
one.
up too.
Yep.
Yeah, I spent a while tinkering. I wanted to make, or I thought about making a like a kids TTRPG that was going to be specifically non-violent and about like problem solving
Mhm.
using things other than violence. Because the first, I tried to play Hero Kids with my oldest when he was, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6, because that's like the most popular kid targeted RPG, and I didn't think it was particularly well written. I didn't love it, but I was also just disappointed in how like if the only move that your kid has is swing the sword, like all they're going to do is swing the sword. It's the same with grown-ups.
Another
Um,
spectacular one is Critical Core, is specifically for kids with autism, so it's a way
oh,
to
cool,
That is
learn about that sort of thing.
cool. That is my oldest.
that is one that or related to the violence thing. Something that I learned and that we had to actually do is the first time we played Magical Kitties. I luckily had a couple of friends with me who stopped my daughter from doing some things that heroes don't do. And I'm not sure if people on here might be familiar with the Tomb of the Delian Order, Matt Colville's like initial. If you watch Running the Game by Matt Colville, his first adventure. It's going and saving the blacksmith's daughter from a cage. She like was very kind to the goblins all the way up through the adventure, and like was like, okay, if I can disarm them, I'll let them go, or if they surrender, I'll let them go. She got to the end where she's rescuing another young girl who's being about to be sacrificed by the goblins, and immediately, I might have messed up as a parent and a DM. Something must have snapped because she's like, no more surrender. Everyone in this room is gonna die. And I'm like, well, I guess we found that. We'll have to back up and unpack that at some point.
Well, and it has its place, and like that is how grown-ups usually play RPGs, and that's something that I've thought about a lot. Have any of you guys ever played Pendragon?
I've been eyeballing it for a long time.
It's one of my favorite RPGs ever. It is beautifully written. The campaign that comes with it, the Great Pendragon campaign, is so cool. The way it works is each session takes place over the course of a year in game. And so it's like you talk about what your people do in the winter, and then springtime comes, and springtime is for adventuring, and then you go off and you have an adventure, and then you talk about what they're going to do in the fall to prepare for next winter. And so your characters age really fast while you're playing, and then you'll eventually they'll have kids, and then you'll start playing as their kids as like the grown-ups ages start to decline. A lot of the Deadball aging stuff is based on Pendragon. But Pendragon was a game that I ran for my friends for a while, and we played maybe 20 sessions of it. We got like maybe a quarter or a third of the way through the Great Pendragon campaign, and God, I would have loved to keep going with it. But instead I had a second child.
That's
but it was, and I like that kid a lot. He's a lot of fun. But what blew my mind about Pendragon is that so before that we played a lot of Cthulhu, Call of Cthulhu, and in that game, like the answer is always kill it with fire. And so my friends would play as true like role-playing game lunatics, who like if they meet somebody and he's like unhelpful, they just shoot him in the head. Because that's just like what that game kind of trains you to do. Because if somebody's being shady, it does, yeah. And so I would not blaming them at all because like players respond to the game. Like the game is the thing that like tells you what to do. It tells you how to play it. And so and also like that kind of thing is hilarious, and you have a lot of fun, and there's like all the laughs with the GM afterwards. Like, well, the reason that guy was being kind of unhelpful is because he was busy. It's not because he was like an evil cultist or anything. He was kind of busy, and you killed him. So that's not great. But what blew my mind about playing Pendragon with folks was that that game is so well written and so well crafted to like encourage you to be like a moral knight who is like campaigning on behalf of good. That like my players behaved so well in the world, and I would love to go back and look at it because like there was one friend of ours who hadn't been playing Pendragon. He played a lot of Cthulhu with us, and he stepped into a game of Pendragon, and he decided that his knight was going to be bad. And it like the other knights were like, we don't like this guy. This guy's bad. He's like being evil. And then he got killed in his first session. And everybody was like, good. Forget that guy. And so then the rest of the time they're just all so like they're just like going around being nice to people. And it's like, why is this game so well written that it can like totally turn people's behavior around? And so yeah, I think looking for something like that has a similar effect on kids would be cool. But obviously it's also fun to sometimes just roll up and kill things with fire.
For sure.
Everyone loves zombies.
Yeah.
The classic.
I see people calling out Twilight Imperium and Diplomacy. Those are two of my favorite old school games.
We can slip that in. Favorite, couple of other favorites?
Well, I mean, I'd love to talk about Diplomacy a little bit because I don't know if you guys.
It is absolutely my favorite game.
I've never
so
played
cool. It is the most spectacular game that is also it's slightly broken. Like
Smarmy, why do you gotta say that? Because now I have to run it on the server. Okay, I'll get that.
That's not a bad idea. That would be cool. Like, have you ever used playdiplomacy.com or Play Diplomacy Online or whatever?
That. I played in the Nexus tournament in 2021 and took like 49th out of like 150 people.
Way to go.
So
Shoot, I would play some diplomacy on the server. That would be fun. I
right.
haven't done that in a while.
I have a lot of maps that is. Well, I
Ooh.
don't want to monopolize everyone's time, but we'll talk about that.
Sorry, yeah,
really
you
good.
but yeah, diplomacy is a blast. For those of you who haven't played it, it has no dice. It is entirely based on conversation. I've played it maybe 3 or 4 times in person, and we've never gotten past the mid game because it is slow. Like you could spend 7 hours and not get past the mid game. It's really like something you'd want to sort of set us like play over the course of a weekend. Um, but it's so much fun in person because as soon as you get started, like first turn, everybody breaks off in these little huddles, and you like set a timer, and it's like, all right, we've got like 15 minutes for negotiations. And so people are like going off and like whispering, and then you see the person you were just talking to, and he's talking to the guy who you said that you guys were both going to attack, but he said he was going to go lie to him, but maybe he's not actually lying to him. And then everybody writes down their orders on a piece of paper, but if you want, you can write down like fake orders, and like put those in, and they like like the real orders supersede them, and so there's like all kinds of shenanigans. It's so much fun. For a game without a GM, it creates a heck of a lot of conflict and also can lead to some pretty seriously hurt feelings because it is not a fair game. And it's a game where one person will get like destroyed on like turn 3. And if you're playing in real life, like that person, it's just like, well, I guess I can either go home or watch my friends play this game for another 8 hours.
Oh
Um,
wow.
but so it lends itself really, really well to play by post. So I used to, I think, up to the pandemic, I had a great pandemic game with some of my friends from high school, and you put on like 72-hour turns or something, and then you're just like furiously sending messages back and forth. So it really lends itself to like a Discord setting. It's a blast.
It is a great Discord game. I just messaged Yawatig. We'll get this going.
Great. Okay, cool.
So
Um,
all right.
yeah, man, it's a great way to make friends and then quickly lose them.
Yeah.
Are there any other games that work as well as diplomacy for that kind of thing? Like I remember during the pandemic, my friends and I tried to play, oh, what's it called? There's some like space game that's like a real-time thing. It's like an online space game.
Neptune's Pride.
Yes,
So
that game almost works, but instead it's horrible.
Yeah. So I told the story last night. There are 2 games that have ever made me like angry reading the rules at how good they are. The first one is Deadball.
He did say
for the
this
record.
yesterday.
The second one is it's a game called Subterfuge, which is dead and has a community trying to revive it, but is Neptune's Pride but good. Is the only way to describe
cool.
it. But these are both but Neptune's Pride and Subterfuge are both based off of diplomacy.
Mhm.
So there's that.
Yeah, Neptune's Pride, it feels really cool, but
There's too much.
it's like it's too much, but also it's like what is the opposite of a slippery slope game where it's just impossible to ever finish anybody off. And so it just goes on forever and becomes like really, really frustrating and like not fun. It's too bad.
Monopoly.
Yeah, kind of like Monopoly, yeah.
So we have a couple questions here.
Yeah, please.
So, you mentioned a lot of games that have inspired you in passing. Are there any that you would want to explore and iterate on, but haven't had the time?
Yes. One is called Deadball. If I had more time, I would be working on a new Deadball supplement right now. But as far as other people's games, I have always wanted to make a game so like Lost Ship is sort of my simplified version of B-17 Queen of the Skies, if anybody knows that game. It's like an old World War II tabletop game. It's so good. It's so good. You can find the rules online and play it print and play for free. I recommend it. I've only ever played through it one time, but it was like one of the most intense like 4-night gaming experiences of my whole life. It's just like white knuckled terror. It's so good. So Lost Ship is like a simplified version of that.
Can we get the original in chat from anyone? Or what the name of the game? I totally blanked on.
B-17 Queen of the Skies. Here, I'll find a link and drop it in there.
Okay.
Yeah, here's the Board Game Geek. It rules. If you think, old planes are cool.
Well, absolutely.
If
Who
you
doesn't?
don't, if you don't, it's probably not the game for you. But it's an old game. It's like tables on tables on tables on tables on tables. But if you roll on enough tables, you eventually get to the one where it's like roll a d6, and if you roll a 1 or a 2, the bullet hit the gas tank and the whole campaign is over. It's a blast. But so Lost Ship is sort of my version of that. There are also some solitaire submarine games from around the same period and newer ones too. That I never found one that was as good as B-17 Queen of the Skies, but I like the vibe of it, and I think submarines are really cool. And so a couple of years ago, I spent a while tinkering with an idea for a space game called Invisible Pirates. That would be basically like a submarine game in space. And I've never had time to like get that down, but I would really, really like to. I love I mean, I like space games, but I love anything that evokes, like the terror of people sitting silently on a submarine, listening to depth charges explode near them. I'm a big sucker for that kind of thing in fiction, and I think that sort of thing in space is really fun. So were there but world enough in time, I would be working on that also.
Oh yeah, Periscope down and all. Love that
Hmm.
stuff.
Oh,
Oh,
it's great. It's always the same, and it always works really, really well.
oh yes.
Um, so a couple questions about to bring it back to sports here. So first off,
Hmm.
uh, baseball being such a narrow subject with only so much past and ever evolving future, how much more material do you think you have left to explore via expansions or further editions of Dead Ball?
That's an
And then
interesting question.
some related topics here that we could go into. Uh, any other sport games that you would be interested in exploring? I know that Top Flight has been one that's brought up multiple times in the past.
Hmm.
Or
Yeah.
are there or sports that even if you aren't like you would not be the person to write it, that are like a sport that is underserved in the sports sim
Hmm.
or gaming community?
Well, let's see. I'll answer the first question first. So I would say that baseball's history is not limited at all. There's like an
No.
infinite amount of it. Um, but I do think that like I feel like I have done most of the major work that I want to do on Deadball. Like the second edition, I feel like was kind of my definitive word on the game. But I do still want to keep making it, partly just because I really, really enjoy it. And also because I like y'all so much and it's fun to make stuff for you guys and the other people who play the game. I think that I like working on the Southern Circuit. That's like a thing that I think is mostly for me. I don't know how many people actually play through the 9 game pennant campaigns. I don't even know how many people read the team write-ups, but like I love writing those. I think it's so much fun. And I'm really attached to those characters. Like I've been following those teams for 7, 8 years now, and like I don't want them to go away. So I didn't release a supplement last year, so the 2024 rosters like never got released. I have those on my Google Sheets, like in my spreadsheets. So I'm still planning on releasing those at some point. I think probably what I'm going to do is release like a bundle of like the 2024 rosters and ones for 2025 and maybe an update for the ancient era rosters too, maybe just 1 year or maybe two if I have the time, which I don't. Um, just to put that out there, and then I would release that as like a cheap supplement, like a $5 supplement or something. Um, because like I really that's just for me, but like I just like doing it. Um, and um, and I think like I've always justified working on the Southern Circuit as saying that it's even if people aren't playing with these teams so much, I think it is inspiring people to make their own leagues, which is more important and more fun. I think people, as soon as they read about that, they're like, "Ooh, I want to make my own league that I'm as into as this guy's into his league," and that's
It's
really the point of it.
it's definitely something that I've used with other people to be like, by the way, like or like, hey, here's like, look at this crazy stuff that happens. By the way, you can just make your own. You can make a team
Hmm.
that does this stuff
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, the same as like when, if you're reading like a D&D book, like you don't want to go out and play with like the stock players. You want to make up your own players because that's where the fun is. Um, but so I want to keep working on that. I think probably like so the next edition I put out, it'll probably be sort of like I did for year 3, where it's like here are a few rules tweaks and then a lot of the fiction stuff. I don't foresee any like major rules overhauls, but like after another 2 or 3 years, we'll be 10 years past the original creation of the modern era, and it's like at what point is baseball in a new era? It's hard to say, like the game is already very different from the way that it was in 2017. So like that is a thing that will have to be reckoned with. And I have a little bit like, there is the like the juiced ball hit table for like 2019, but that's not exactly where we are right now in baseball either. But also like my goal is not to just like make a new hit table every year with like slight tweaks. But yeah, so I think like I'm definitely going to keep making dead ball stuff. It's going to be less groundbreaking and more just like basically me having fun with it, as a way of like inspiring other people to have fun with it. Let's see. Luker, you asked if there's a definitive list of all the Southern League players. No, is the short answer. So I've got great big league spreadsheets for every year of it, which I'd be happy to share with you. But there is not a definitive single list. And then somebody else was asking about other sports that I would like to see games about. I would love to make a soccer game if I can ever figure out a way to make it work. That's actually something that most recently I've tinkered with as an RPG. Like an RPG with like a really, really light sim element. Because I have found that the difficulty for me with soccer is that it's so fluid. It's difficult to render as like, bit by bit, like discrete moments in dice. Baseball lends itself incredibly well to a dice game because it is heavy on numbers. It is broken down into discrete moments. And also, every time the batter comes up, they're essentially trying to do like one of maybe 2 or 3 things. Whereas when a soccer player receives a soccer ball, there's like effectively an infinite number of things that they could try to do, So that's why soccer has proven really difficult. If somebody cracks it, I would play the heck out of that game. I have thought about tennis. Tennis would work really well because it is more like single discrete moments. Each player is just always trying to do the exact same thing, just trying to hit the ball at the other guy, and make it so they can't hit it. You guys, some of the people who've been following my work for longer, know that I worked for a long time on like a horse racing game that I never released, because I never quite got it where I wanted it. Horse racing works really, really well with dice. American football would work really well with dice. I don't follow it anymore, so and I know we've had people working on football games in here, which I think is awesome. I've I was for a while like daydreaming about it, and it's like, you make a dice-based football game. It's like this is football without head injuries, which is perfect. You take the head injuries out of it, football's an awesome game.
I actually went the opposite way of I was writing a football game for like the 1880s when
well,
six
which would
players
also
would
be
die a
great.
game.
That's great, but they're not real people, so
Yeah.
it's okay.
It's okay when it's just a spreadsheet.
Yeah, it's great. Kill at will. And I know. Are you the one who's worked on a cricket game, or is it somebody else?
That's Cause.
Cause is the cricket game. I'm the hockey
That's
game.
right. That's
Hockey
right.
game and
Okay.
the Formula One game.
Which is great. I mean, yeah, racing of any kind works great. I've also tinkered with like gladiatorial combat. I think would be really cool. I know we were talking about boxing the other day, and that made me think of that. I think so. Part of the reason, like, when I first started working on games that weren't Deadball, it's so freeing to be working on something that doesn't have to accurately model reality. Because, like when you come up with a cool mechanic, but then you have to look at like, how does this reflect like real life statistics? That's like a tight constraint. And the fact that I've been able to like work through it is frankly just a miracle. And is like great. And I'm really, really happy about that. But it means that when I've ever tried to work on other sports games, like I really feel that constraint tightly. Which is too bad. But it means that something like gladiatorial combat, where we do not have statistics for the gladiators, it's like all strictly like an imaginary thing, I think could work really well because you could really just make it your own and make the shit up and just like make it fun. And it like if the only rule is it has to be fun, not it has to be fun and reflect reality, you can go a lot farther, a lot faster.
Oh, that's just free real estate then.
Yeah.
Question
Yeah.
that has come up a couple of times, and I think it would be good to get just a definitive answer on. We're a little over an hour in. Is the idea of a fully automated deadball game, and if I maybe want to dovetail it out, just video games in general, of exploring that in the future for deadball, either you or someone in the community or anything like that.
I mean, no, it's not a thing that I've pursued. Maybe I will at some point. I have so much other stuff going on that the idea of learning how to make video games is just like not a thing I have time for. Because like, like outside of Deadball, I'm currently working on 2 books and I've also got a full-time job. Or
Yeah,
like a
we
30-hour
got to
a
hear
week
more
job.
about those later, by the way.
Oh yeah, happy to talk about that. But so if somebody wants to make a Deadball video game, I'd talk to them about it. It's a thing that I'm wary of putting out into the world because I feel like that's something that could overshadow the original product, but also maybe not. I don't know. It's a thing I'd talk to somebody about, you know?
Yeah.
But I've never been able to visualize a Deadball video game that seemed appealing to me that also I would be able to make. Um, but I think like it could lend itself to something very simple. Has anybody on here played what's it called? Armored Commander 2, I think.
I've seen it.
It's so good. Yeah, Armored Commander 2. It rules. I've got 47 hours in it on Steam. I would have thought I'd had more. But like that's the kind of deadball game I can imagine making, something that is like deliberately ugly and like ASCII and like feels like sort of
Yeah.
a 1994 DOS product. Um, Something like that could be cool. But that's not something I've thought practically about.
Yeah, it's not low budget. It's just the atmosphere that you're going for.
hmm Yeah, I mean, and that game's amazing because it's just one developer and it's so deep, but man, it rules and it's cool looking. Like the graphics are cool.
Yeah. So like I've played like the World in Flame like Vassal module, which is like
hmm
that it kind of reminds you a little bit of like what you'd be going for there with that sort of thing where like it would be a um it's not low budget because it's really not, but like
Yeah.
it feels like a 90s video games, if that makes
hmm
sense.
Yeah, oh yeah, I love that kind of thing.
Okay, let's see. My question, the one I actually asked, was: do you find that certain projects go quicker than others, or do you ever have like I know for me, I have ideas that sometimes just spew out fully formed from my head. That's like,
hmm
well, that all totally works, and we're just gonna crank that out in a couple of weeks. Versus some that feel like a chore to work on, and
Oh yeah,
curious your opinions on that.
absolutely. I mean, yeah, like because and the annoying thing is that often I feel like the ones that come really fast are also the best ones, which is not fair. Like it's so unfair that they would be easy to make and also the really good ideas. Not this is not always the case, but if something is torturous to make, it will usually be torturous to play. Not always. But like I figured out I made Deadball in like 36 hours, like the earliest version of it. It was like a feverish 36 hours. I had this idea and then I basically couldn't sleep until I was done with it. But like the absolute core of the game came together really, really fast. And obviously Deadball works. And some of the like Lost Ship, I basically figured out one day while I was at the laundromat, like doing laundry. It took like 2 hours.
By the way, if you're a
Um,
creative type, all these things that he is saying are totally normal. They're
Oh, absolutely.
that
well, they're not. I mean, like, I mean, but it's also like I had the core idea of it put together in like
yeah.
2 hours. I didn't finish Lost Ship until like 2 years later.
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely.
It's the
you know,
2080 rule. The
exactly. Yeah, yeah. It's very much that, and and it's the same with books. Like the next book I have coming out, I had the core idea of that book just like came to me one day while I was walking across my dining room floor. I was like, oh, there's an idea, and then it doesn't. I'm not done writing it for like 3 years. That's actually a coming up with good ideas is often like one of the hardest parts about being a creative person is being able to recognize this is a clever idea, but it's not something that I love enough to actually get across the finish line. I have
Yeah.
wasted hundreds of hours on ideas that were clever, but that I wasn't actually connected to enough to really make perfect, or that were clever but weren't actually good. Um, so like that's like, and as I get older, like being able to look at a thing and think like, yep, that's a good idea. Somebody else should do it because that is not like I'm not connected enough to that to make a really, really great thing of it. Say like, it would be neat to make an American football dice game, but I don't care about American football. Like, so I wouldn't actually be able to put in the work and the passion and everything. Like one of the most common pieces of feedback I've gotten about Deadball is like reading this, you can tell this guy really loves baseball, and it's like, yeah, that's like a thing that like it comes through on every page because that's like the main inspiration for it. It's just like I think baseball is neat, and I love it, and I want to share that with people. Like I keep meaning to. I got to pre-order my baseball prospectus for this year. Um, like that's how much I love baseball. That's like one of my favorite times of year. Is like, ooh, the baseball prospectus is coming.
Let's switch towards because you mentioned a book a couple of times, and we definitely want to give you time to wow us and get us all excited to empty our wallets again. And we also have a big asking about first-time fiction writers.
Yeah. Here, let me go refill my water cup, and I'll be right back. And then we can talk about fiction stuff. All right. So first, I'll tell you a little bit about the books that I'm working on, and then I can talk about just like general writing advice. So the next book I've got coming out is called To Kill a Cook. It's being published by Putnam in 2026. We don't have a release date yet, and it's not available for pre-order yet. When it is, I will certainly let everybody know in the chat. It is about a food critic, a restaurant critic in 1972 Manhattan who finds the best chef in New York with his head cut off and encased in a big blob of aspic, which is like savory jello. And she has to figure out who done it. And I'm currently working on the sequel, which takes place a year later in 1973. So I have been doing like an immense amount of research for that. This is like the fun thing about getting a 2-book deal, which is another miracle. I was very, very lucky with this. It means that I get to spend a lot of time on research because I know that the book is going to happen. I love doing research. It's the kind of thing a person can get lost in. I don't caution against that because research is really fun. And there's nothing better than reading for fun and having it actually be like, toward a project. So those are the 2 books I'm working on right now. So basically my whole year is going to be working on book 2, which is why I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get to another Deadball book or not. I really, really hope I can, but I've got a deadline for this and I can't miss it. So that is like the main thing that I'm working on right now. As far as advice for first-time fiction writers, let's see. Mostly just do it. I know that's what Smarmy said, and he's right. Fiction is such a funny thing because in order to write a story or a book, you have to know everything about it all at once in a way that is impossible. So it's a task that is sort of impossible because, like, in a perfect world, you would sit down and you would know everything you know about the characters and everything you need to know about the plot and everything you need to know about the world and everything you need to know about the voice, all like before you type the first sentence. But that's not possible. So accept that that's impossible and instead just know that you're going to be figuring that stuff out sort of in fits and starts. So you're gonna, maybe you start working on this project because you have a really cool idea for the premise. So you're gonna sit down, you're gonna think about like, okay, so this is the thing that starts the story. Great. But I don't know who any of the characters are. So then you throw the premise aside, and it's like, well, I got to work on these characters for a while. But wait, but what world is this? So you throw the characters aside, and then you got to work on the world for a while, and you're going to end up with like sort of going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and like know that eventually all of that stuff is going to cohere and you actually are going to be able to write something where you have like a pretty full appreciation of it. I'm a big proponent of outlining. Some people aren't. I'm currently working on an outline for book 2 in this series. My outlines are nuts. They tend to run like 20,000 words, so they end up being about a quarter of the length of the book. They're really sort of like a hybrid of an outline and a rough draft. I don't recommend doing that crazy thing to do. But I do think that the more you can figure out about your story before you start composing, the better off you'll be. The thing I always tell people is that you wouldn't build a house without a blueprint. And you should try to build some kind of blueprint for your story, even if it's pretty loose. Ideally, you don't want to be in a position where you are trying to write the entire book all at once or the entire story all at once. So what I mean by that is if you are worrying about like how should this line of dialogue sound, you don't also want to be worrying about what's supposed to happen in this scene. And also, who is this character? And what's happening in the next scene? And what's the story about? And what's the ending? Like, you don't want to be trying to figure all that stuff out all at the same time. So the more of that, the more of the bigger picture stuff you can figure out ahead of time, the more fun you can have just writing. And I think that, like, people say that outlining will stifle creativity. For me, I feel like it provides, knowing that I have a framework of a story means that I get to go into that framework and just play. The other thing that I will say, people, because I know we have a lot of like RPG fans in here, is that I didn't actually figure out how to write fiction well until I was GMing a lot, because I had always approached my stories and my plays from the point of view of the hero. And I'd figure out like what they're doing, and I'd try to just like sort of follow them through the story. But then when I started running games for people, I found myself flipped around, because when you are running a game for people and you're like planning a session, you have to come up with everything except what the heroes do. You have to figure out the world, you have to figure out the problem, you have to figure out who the bad guys are, and most importantly, you have to figure out what will happen, ideally beaten out step by step by step. And this is the thing I talk about in Comrades, in like the GMing section, which is actually really just like how to write well, like guide from me. You need to know what will happen if the heroes do nothing. So if the heroes don't do anything on day one, the villain's plot will advance like this. If they don't do anything on day two, the villain's plot will advance like this. And like it will keep going and going and going, and then this will be the end result. And until I started GMing, I had no understanding of how to figure out what is the bad guy's plan and what is going on. And you really need to, I'm not going to say you need to do anything. It is very helpful to know that. And particularly in what I do, which is mystery novels, like obviously you got to know what the villain's plan is, because you have to figure out, usually your hero doesn't encounter it until they find a dead body or they see a murder or whatever. So you have to be able to figure out everything that led up to that. And then as the hero or as the villain was taking the steps that led to that murder, figuring out like what clues they left behind. So sometimes I imagine like crafting a mystery as you're like building a dinosaur skeleton and you're putting it in the earth and you're coming up with this big, intricate, complicated plot, and then you bury it almost entirely. And the clues that you leave behind are like these little bits of bone sticking out of the sand that at first glance have nothing to do with each other, and your hero will find them and like, you know, slowly unearth the whole mystery. But for that to be possible, you have to have a cool skeleton to put into the ground. So that is a bunch of sort of half-connected thoughts, but basically plan is my suggestion. Think a lot. The thing that I do always when I'm brainstorming, and a thing I recommend to people, is go for a walk with a tape recorder or, you know, a voice notes app or whatever. And just like walk around and ask yourself questions about the book. Who's my hero? What's going on? Like, what are they interested in? Like, why are they passionate about this? Like, what are they trying to do? What is the world? All that stuff. Just ask yourself questions and then answer them while you walk. I do this all the time. And it's great because even if you don't come up with anything, you got some exercise, and, you know, maybe you saw a duck or something, which is nice. But like just that physical movement stimulates you. And I find that if I'm just daydreaming about a story, I go in circles. If I sit down and try to write down ideas, I feel trapped, because I feel like I have to be too specific. I've like the blank page was really screaming at me. Something about moving and then just having the recorder running is a nice halfway point between those two things. So it's like enough focus, and you're right. Yeah, seeing a duck is great. It's enough focus that it forces you to give structure to your ideas, but it's not so restrictive that you feel overwhelmed by it, or at least I don't. And the funny thing is, I never listen to the recordings ever. I delete them as soon as I'm done. What I do is I go home and I write down all of the most important stuff that I came up with, type, 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 and then I have that as like a record of that walk. And I find that like doing that moves my stories forward, moves my imagination, my brainstorming forward like so fast. So that is my other piece of advice. What else do you guys want to know about fiction or other stuff?
So, I think this would be a fun question, and it might have a split answer here. But favorite fictional character that you made without diving into spoilers if possible.
Ooh,
More
great question.
more general favorite kind of character to write. I think it would also be fun to know a couple of the favorites from the Southern Circuit too.
Oh, okay, great. So my favorite type of character to write is somebody who, what's a good way to put it this? People who are in a hurry. People who don't wait around, people who are decisive, who talk a lot, who think faster than their mouths can catch up with them. I love writing that kind of person. And essentially like people who like don't take any shit. Like because in real life you have to be polite, and when you're writing a fictional character, it's just so fun to have somebody who's not polite. Because partly because it's fun, but also because it cuts through all kinds of BS. So like if you're writing a character who has to go into a building to do something, and they go up to the security guard, and the security guard's like, you can't come in, and the character's like, oh, and then they're the kind of person who just like turns away and walks away, like, well, that's not very much fun. So it's a lot more fun to have somebody who will just like shove through a door and start screaming at people. Like those people are fun to write. So my favorite fictional characters that I've come up with, I'm not going to choose between them, just like I wouldn't choose my kids, but I'll say Gilda Carr, the hero of the West Side books, and Bernice Black, the hero of To Kill a Cook, and the as yet untitled sequel to that, which are my next two books. Because they are both people who they're just so much fun to write. They are both extremely like on edge all the time, in a way that's really fun. It just means that they're the kind of people who can create conflict with anybody they meet, and that they just like will absolutely rip through any obstacle you give them. Like people like that are really, really fun to write. Um, and then as far as like favorite people in the Southern Circuit, I see that Pharaoh's friend loved the name Woogie Stabile. Woogie Stabile is a real person. That's a friend of mine's little sister. Her name is not actually Woogie, but they for some reason have called her that her whole life. So the Southern Circuit is great because in the modern, actually no, yeah, no, in the modern Southern Circuit, a lot of the characters who are originally on the Broad Street Peacocks are friends of mine from high school. So it's been really fun to see them grow and change and move around. And, they probably are mystified like once or twice a year when I get a text where I'm like, you just got a walk-off home run. And they're like, why are you still texting me about this? I don't care. But they're all people who backed the first Deadball thing, Kickstarter. And so they've been in there forever, even though they probably never think about it anymore. And then in the ancient era, I really love Mercury Tyne, who is the shortstop, I think, for the Broad Street Peacocks. I really, really loved writing about Bean Alfrey, the psychotic ex-manager of the Redbirds, and his disciple. Oh God, what's her name? I can't remember off the top of my head, but I love Bean, a true like absolute like backwoods lunatic, and the type of person that we just don't have enough of in the modern game. Evil characters are fun to write about. So yeah, there, especially in the ancient era, there's a lot of just like evil characters. Like what's her name? I think Faye Harbaugh was one of the managers who was just like a sadist, and like she was just a little bit like a very successful sadist. Like she was really fun to write about. There's also forget her name too. That whoever the manager is for the Broad Street Peacocks in the ancient era, I give her write up every year is something completely ridiculous. That's just like a totally wacky adventure that she had that's unrelated to baseball. Like she saw a guy drowning in the Cumberland River and she went after him and saved him, and now he's her new starting pitcher, stuff like that. And I love writing those little write-ups. She is all of those are based on the newsletter I do, Strange Times. They're all just like weird old articles I found from the 1920s that I use as the inspiration for her little adventure. Um, yeah, so those are some of my faves. But really, I just love all of them. I love Beefsteak Atkins. I was sorry his stats dropped off and he had to retire. I was like, no, not Beefsteak Atkins. What is the league without him? And that's how you feel about all of them. It's the way that you feel about your favorite players in real life. When they get old and retire, it's like, why? I need to reinstate Beefsteak. I've thought about it. I think because like I had him retire as a result of like a freak injury. Um, he's gonna have to come back as a manager, I think. He's gonna get the chance to manage that Babe Ruth never got. There, yeah, yeah, love Peg. Mhm. Yeah, I love Peg. She has fun. Yeah, they're all yeah, I love the managers. They're all the managers are all great fun to write about because they all have a bit. And I revisit the bit every year, and when the bit gets old, they get fired. I have a question for the group. I would love to hear about anything that y'all would like to see in future supplements, rules clarifications, or anything else like that. I'm going to take notes because I'm interested in what you guys have to say. What do you mean? Like, be like, what kind of defense?
Uh, I want to see more options for like sending guys from third base.
All right.
Defensive positioning.
Mm, like the stuff that was in the first edition that I cut.
Yeah. Yep.
All
Like
right.
shift, or even just as simple as something that has been saying in my mind now is just infield in, infield out,
Mhm.
double play
Hey,
out.
the shift's not in baseball anymore, so
I know, right? But if you're playing before 2024 or 2023 or whatever,
yeah.
all right, clarify the hit and run. That's easy.
Yeah, I will admit that while I understand what the hit and run is, I struggle sometimes to read the chart that you have. It
Yeah.
does take a little bit of like reading, and I do get it,
hmm
but that's also from like I have like so many years of like just being around baseball, so
Yep. I've thought about a sci-fi deadball thing. There was a period when after Deadball 1909, I was originally thinking like, what if like next I'll do Deadball 1919 and 1929, and maybe I'll get all the way up to like Deadball 30,019 or whatever.
hmm.
But I fell in love with the players in 1909, and I was like, no, I'm just going to keep doing this year by year.
Yep. I
Uh,
like
All
Yahweh
right.
tag.
All right, yeah, I like that. Yeah, so optional tables for scorekeeping, making the game more dynamic, tracking pop-ups and flyouts and Ks.
Lineouts.
hmm
So we're basically all asking the things that you said before that like you
No.
didn't care about the nitty-gritty as much when we do.
Well, but I mean, this stuff is fun, and also some of this stuff, like, the reason that I've never clarified like precisely what type of out was that is because mechanically it doesn't matter, but narratively it is interesting, and it is fun to know, like, oh, that was a line out to third base, whatever.
Yeah.
So like those are things that I haven't introduced. I think those are things that wouldn't be appropriate in the core rule book but that are great to have in supplements. Like, here's an
Yeah,
optional rule.
absolutely.
If you like it, use it, and if you don't.
So Fear is
Absolutely.
suggesting that we all just play 1E again.
A lot of people like 1E better, which I think is great.
Golden.
I like it hurts me to look at it because I've gotten so much better at layout since then. Like the 1E book is uglier than the 2E book.
That is a question
Um,
that came in earlier, and I apologize, I missed it. And it's something I'm interested in too. is how much time was spent on the layout for like the Southern Circuit pages or the team rosters, anything. If I'm thinking techie, I'm thinking UI related. But
You mean like how do I lay them out? Or like what are the
how much
challenges in
time?
laying them out?
Challenges with how you lay them out? How much time do you spend on doing them?
Well, I mean,
Fitting
the
fitting such
Southern
a
Circuit
complex game on
pages
a game. Yeah.
obviously like the Southern Circuit pages, they get tweaked a little bit each year, but basically those are the same in every book. And I just copy and paste the new rosters and the new write-ups and everything. And then there's always one thing that I forget to copy and paste, and so it still says what it said last year, something like that. So those come together really fast. Writing them takes a while, but I enjoy doing that, and it's like a fun challenge. I think another piece of writing advice: write to a word count. Like the writing in those is some of the best writing I do all year because you've got like 40 words to say something clever. It's a terrific exercise. But so the actual like I figured out a format or like a formula starting with 2E or not 2E, year 2. Because that was when I went to the slightly larger book. And so since then the layout hasn't changed a lot. There's a lot of little things that get tweaked each time. But once I get to laying out a Deadball book, it takes about 3 days. It's not that long. Doing the layout for something like Letters to the Stars, where I basically started from scratch and I was integrating like a lot more inline images and a lot more color and stuff like that. That took weeks because I was deliberately doing something really ambitious. I wanted to like push my layout a little bit. But Deadball, like obviously I want all the books to look the same so they all feel of a piece. And that has the advantage of meaning that like, when I start a new book, I start by making a copy of last year's book and then deleting a lot of it. But I use it as like a template. So I'm able to do it pretty fast. But you can like hold up Masters of the Game and compare it to the first Deadball book, and there's like it looks better. It also doesn't have the typo that's on the table of contents of 1E.
Nobody would have noticed it. You just kind of called yourself out.
I mean, it's been there for a long time. Nobody's pointed it out that I think it says chapter 4 twice.
Well,
It's
it's a common known thing in publishing that when you open up a book for the first time, hot off the presses, you will immediately find a typo.
It is true, man. And every time like that, and that's why I finally started doing the thing where I'll release the PDF and then sit on it for a week before I send it to the printer, which is hard to do. Like as soon as you're done with that PDF, you want to send it to the printer right now. But every single time it'd be like I'd send it to the printer and then I'd get a like an email from somebody who's like, on page 45, there's no spaces in between the words. And I'm like, how did I miss that? But yeah, that's just how it happens. So now I try to give myself a buffer and use the community's free proofreaders.
Yeah. Some of the other things that have come in, home run derby.
We've got a home run derby.
There are a couple of those. Golden.
Yeah,
the golden
yeah.
batter.
There's rules for home run derby and Masters of the Game and the steroid year, aren't there?
Yep. Oh,
Yeah.
looks like we've solved that.
Yeah.
Thank you, community. Golden batter.
I mean, there is like.
As someone who didn't watch the Arabian Baseball League, what is the golden batter?
Yeah, somebody remind me of that because like I've heard of that, but I don't remember exactly how it works.
The golden batter?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a new wacky rule thing.
Oh, that, yeah. It's called the golden ball or whatever. You get any run scored on that at bat is counted twice.
That's very silly. I like it, but yeah.
We have.
I'll put in anything but the Manfred Man.
I mean, that's one of the part of the beauty of the whole game to me is that like the Manfred Man, you could just put in there. Doesn't care.
Yeah, easy. Yeah. If you want that, sure. Or if you want ties after the 9th inning, you can do that too.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to ruin baseball, then go ahead, put the Manfred Man on.
Well, yeah, but I mean, the great thing about making a tabletop game, and this is the thing that I've been enjoying since this whole project started, is that it's not like, if you're a fan of a video game and a new patch comes out that changes all the features you like, you're stuck. You can either play the old version and never get an update or eat it and just like, give up on all the features you like. But with tabletop, it's like, I'm going to keep making up new stuff and you can use it or not. It's great.
So I have to jump in real quick. There's a difference between the golden ball that the Arabian League is using and the golden batter that
Mhm.
Manfred has tossed out. The golden batter,
Oh yeah, that's its own thing.
you stub in any other batter to bat whenever you want.
Oh, I'm thinking of the wrong. Okay,
So
you're right.
Yeah.
You clarified what the golden ball was from the Arabian League, which is what the question was about. But as far as what the golden batter is, it's
Mhm.
it's the bottom of the ninth. You've got one out. The bases are loaded. Shohei's on deck. We're going to use the golden batter rule. So Shohei comes up with the bases loaded. Oh no, Shohei strikes out. Well, guess what? Shohei's up again. What are you going to do?
Yeah. It's
So ridiculous.
Banana ball rules.
Yeah, it's arguably the worst idea Rob Manfred has ever had, and that's saying something because that
Well,
man
the
is a
reason
bad idea
the reason he
factory.
did it, the reason he did it is just so he could offer something else that's less crazy, and they're like, oh, at least it's not so bad.
Yep.
Banana ball sucks. I will die on that hill.
Yeah, I've
Baseball.
heard it's fun, but I've never been.
It's great for the sport.
Banana ball is like the Harlem Globetrotters of baseball. Truly need to look themselves in the mirror and reevaluate their analogies and their life choices, because at least the Harlem Globetrotters play basketball.
Mhm.
The banana ball, there is nothing baseball related about it other than there's a guy on the mound who throws it to a guy swinging a stick.
Man, I thought I would be the purist here, but apparently not. Can't believe I'm defending the banana.
As someone who once actually was backup in a Harlem Globetrotter show.
Ooh.
Not super fancy. I was in the band.
Ooh.
Yeah, I would rather watch Banana Ball any day of the week.
My favorite version of the Harlem Globetrotters is the one on Futurama, where they're all like brilliant mathematicians.
Also, they made a real formula for that. Like they designed it specifically for the episode because the guys that run Futurama are all mathematicians.
I love it. I love that show so much.
Best Harlem Globetrotters are the ones that solve cases with Scooby-Doo.
They're also great. I love the cartoon history of the Harlem Globetrotters. What a fun thing.
Yeah.
Talking about mysteries, so this is something that I would like to see more of in Deadball. Is we had in year 3 a scenario to play as the Black Sox and lose, and that's something that has always been cool. Like, because the 9-game pennant is interesting, but it is committing to 9 games. And running a whole league on the back end of like game scenarios that you could just drop yourself
I like
into.
that idea.
Another one that I think of is the Phillies and the Pirates, where the Pirates put up 10 runs in the first inning, and then ended up losing the game.
Oh, that's incredible.
Playing that off of the bat of Steve Yeltz, which if you know that name and you didn't watch the video from Secret Base on that, wow, you're king of the baseball nerds. Congrats. Yeah, there's a Secret Base episode about it, but
share the link in general or whatever when we're done.
Yeah.
Yeah. But different scenarios like that, I always thought would.
I love that idea. That's great.
Fun. A book of like, okay, here's the situation. You have an amazing pitcher, but you're down by 4, or you have a runner on third, but your 3 worst batters on there.
That's great fun. I love that. Yeah, I'm always looking for anytime you have any ideas for like that kind of like replicable thing that I can put into future editions, because like I only have so many more rules to come up with or clarify, but I like making the game and I want to have an excuse to keep publishing the Southern Circuit rosters. So things like that are really fun.
Yeah, like the snapshots, like in Road to the Show.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, or even like the way that in Flight Simulator, it's like, here is a difficult flight we're going to drop you into. Can you handle it?
Ooh.
I know that's a whole other hobby I just introduced. I'm not actually a big flight sim guy, but I have phases.
Oh my gosh, do you have the whole setup?
No, I wish. Maybe someday. I haven't looked at the new Flight Simulator because it's like got a lot of AI integrated, and it's also like it's always online or something. But I enjoy fiddling around with airplanes. Pretend airplanes.
And airplanes.
Yeah.
Is that the baseball model train sort of thing going on there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like the equivalent?
Yeah. I mean, listen, if I had the space for it, I could be into model trains too. I love a train.
Love it.
Oh boy, I'd love to
We're
hear
getting
more about
out.
doing ATC on VATSIM.
Yeah.
That's the thing I've
Well,
read about. That's the serious stuff. I love that.
oh yeah. Do we have any other questions we haven't hit yet?
I'm trying to think. If you
Yep.
have any, let us know. Or absolutely, if you want to come up here and just chat or
I've
anything
actually
like
got
that.
one for you, Akers.
Let's hear it, man.
Yeah.
Did you think, 10 years ago that you would one day be sitting in a Discord chat talking for 2 hours about your creation?
Absolutely not. For one thing, I don't think I knew what Discord was 10 years ago. But no, this is I'm not even going to say it's a dream come true because it's not the kind of thing that I would have dreamed of, but it's just delightful. I'm so happy to be here and I'm so happy to have you guys dig in the game. And thank you so much for putting the con together. I hope everyone who's enjoying this knows I had nothing to do with this. I did no work. I did not contribute in any way except for showing up to this Q&A. So yeah, thank you guys for doing all the work and for keeping the game going and for continually encouraging me to come up with new stuff for it. It's really cool.
Yeah, we love being a part of the community. I think I speak for a lot of the people here when I say that. I mean, this is something that we're all very excited every day to when we get to see oh, I see a new message in here. I gotta go check it out, see what everybody's talking about. I love
It's a
that. I love every
treat.
day. Yeah, I love it.
Well, it's also, I mean, you guys have done a great job to craft this is even taking the baseball side out of it. This is just a really delightful Discord server. And so, especially since I'm not on Twitter anymore, I'm not on Facebook, this is one of my favorite ways to talk to strangers on the internet. It's the main Discord server. I've got other Discord servers that I'm looking at my toolbar here and I'm like, what even are those? I need to unsubscribe from all of these. I don't care about that video games Discord server. Get out of there. But you guys
Yeah.
are great. This is just continual fun.
Yeah. Is there anything? I guess I have a question. I suppose I didn't mean to cut you off, Scotch. But is there anything that we can do to support you other than obviously we like buying the material that you have? How can we support you in your other endeavors and in Deadball also?
Oh my God, nothing. Y'all are doing it. This is just great. And yeah, having an audience that is going to be excited for the thing you make is the absolute best encouragement for a creative person. It's something that most creative people never get, and I am fully aware of how lucky I am to have you guys here excited to see what I come up with.
We're getting a couple of bring back the Hot 9. The New Orleans Hot 9 from the WDA.
Yo, I love the Hot 9. They were a great team, but man, I did not have the bandwidth for that.
We didn't talk about that, but yeah, Akers was in the WDA for the first season.
Yeah, it was a blast. I really, really enjoyed it. But yeah, I was just I was looking at the year that I was going to have this year. I was or last year, and I was just I don't have it. So thank you guys for letting me bow out gracefully. I'm sorry that the team has not fared so well in my absence, since it doesn't exist anymore.
They moved it to Buffalo, I think.
Oh, nice.
That's tough. You feel for the players that that came to New Orleans for the nightlife, and now they're in Buffalo.
Yeah.
Oh, Buffalo has that one bar.
I mean, it is home of the Buffalo Wing. They got something going on.
They also have 3 feet of snow every year, immediately.
Yeah. That's something that we can maybe talk about for a second. Is do you ever look at I know you've kind of talked about this, and I'm sure to a degree, but has there ever been a moment in the Discord where you're like, oh, the game is broken when this happens, we gotta fix that, or any or notable moments from any of the leagues that you're like, oh, that's interesting that happened?
That's a good question. Well, yeah, actually, I know there was one specific thing. So because the WDA had a pretty big pitching staff, but you were only playing 3 days a week in season 1, I had to clarify some rules around pitcher usage because you could, if you wanted to, just use your backup starting pitchers as relievers, and they could just basically pitch the whole game, every game, in a way that felt OP. And so I don't remember how we approached that, if we made a house rule for it or something, because obviously you can't do that if you're playing a regular season. because you need your whole rotation. But for season 1 of the WDA, they were like you had extra starting pitchers that you didn't need, and so like you could sort of cheese it by just using them as relievers, right?
Yeah. And what we ended up doing was we did an expansion draft, so we the new teams got to steal a
Mhm.
couple of starting pitchers, and then basically I fiddled with the table to make starting pitchers a lot more rare in terms of what you could pick up
Mhm.
in free agency and in
Yeah.
prospects.
Yeah, so I think I ended up having to. I might have written. I don't even know if I ever know. I might have shared it with the group or what, but I remember thinking like, oh, I need to clarify this because that is an exploit.
Yeah, and I
But
think
it's
Yeah.
rare. I mean,
that's something I think that is actually in the book now. Is if you use a starting pitcher in relief, they drop the first thing you do is drop a pitch die level.
yep, that makes sense. Yeah, it's but it is rare. I mean, like, because the game is pretty flexible, and what I always say is like because most people are playing it solo, um, I feel like there's a like when you're playing solo and there's no one watching you, I feel like you tend to behave better. Because it's like, well, it's just me here, so if I cheat, I'm really only cheating myself. And so I feel like when a solo player notices something that feels like broken, they will come up with a way to fix it. I think a lot, like we've talked a lot about Universal Baseball Association, the book, and I don't know if you guys remember it. This is not a spoiler, but I mean, it's a slight spoiler for like a 50-year-old book. But there's a scene where he tips the dice to like change what happens in the game, and he immediately throws up. And it's like I think it describes it as like a rainbow of vomit or something. But like that's like the solo player, like because as soon as you start doing that, it breaks the whole game. And so like I feel like a solo player knows like, well, I got to follow the rules, and if the rules aren't giving me what I need to come up with something.
And I can say from the competitive side, it's interesting, or because there's a very fine line there between exploit and no, I'm just actually a clever manager, who's
I know, yeah.
doing what it takes to win, and that you kind of encourage.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is an interesting spot when you start bringing a game ostensibly meant for solo or for just personal enjoyment into a okay, let's compete a little bit and see
It is interesting. Yeah, because I remember
Yeah.
when I was in the playoffs with the WDA playing against, I think, the Grays. Who was the Grays manager?
Was it was it um I knew his name. What was it? Dad?
Well, anyway, whoever it was,
yeah.
he was I was getting flashbacks to the Mets losing the 2015 World Series to the Royals, the way that he was running on me. Um, and he was coming like he was tweaking like every single possible rule exploit to get like a little bit more advantage for his base stealing, and he was just absolutely running me into the ground. It was brutal, and I was very impressive. But I remember thinking like, darn it, he's using my own game against me. And that was a really ruthless series where he and I were both just like scrapping for every possible advantage. In a way that worked, I think, really well. But as you guys
Oh,
are playing the WDA, anytime if you ever notice something where it's like this is falling down a little bit as a two-player game, let me know.
Yeah.
Because that's stuff I can tweak. Like, yeah, when you're playing single player, like you go out of your way to be fair to both teams, and so it's like you've got the team that you're rooting for, and you know that you're rooting for one of the teams, and so you work hard to make sure that you're not giving them any advantages, or at least I do.
Yeah.
um
And
but yeah, it doesn't work that way when you're one on one.
so we didn't
yep.
talk about this before with the solo leagues, but something that I've thought about a little bit is, um, like part of what you're because we did a league fee with the WDA, and that you kind of have to think of it more like you are a group of people playing an RPG that happens to be slightly competitive compared to you are playing Dota or
Hmm.
Rocket League or something that is fully competitive, and that and maybe we're just blessed with the culture around here, maybe it's the game encourages it more, but a couple things did come up in the tournament this afternoon where it was like it was a fielder's choice.
Mm.
And it was like, no, in that situation, the throw definitely would have been to home. It would not have been not a play to second.
Yep.
Yeah.
Is an example of something, and both sides agree, just totally. Like, yep, that is what would have happened there, and it would be dumb for us to think, even though it would give me an advantage to score a run right now, it would be dumb to think that
Yeah,
that
it
is
just ain't
actually,
happening.
Part of that is knowing the game.
That's true. Yeah. Well, yeah, which is why those rules have to be spelled out for the people who don't watch too much baseball.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, and yeah, we had that big conversation recently about like runners advancing on filters choices, and so that's like a thing that I will find a way to clarify in the next book,
Yep.
without trying to put it into the MSS table, which is now it can't get any bigger because then it will be on 2 pages.
You almost need a whole other table of what to do in a fielder's choice in different out
I know.
situations,
And
and
that's
then different run situations.
yeah, and it's really important, and it's the kind of thing that like a baseball fan understands intuitively, a certain type of baseball fan, but that would completely overwhelm a new player. And so yeah, so yeah, I think that's another thing that I will be very happy to have in a supplement, but that I wouldn't necessarily want in the main rules because it's like
Yep.
it's hard enough to explain to
So-
somebody what a fielder's choice is, you know?
So actually, here's something that I'll throw out there when because I've been working on some stuff with like fielder positioning, and one of the ones is looking at what happens during a fielder's choice, and I basically brought it back to the fielder gets a choice of where to throw it. So if you're playing, if you're playing 2-player, the fielding team, you get to choose who is out. It's, and you're probably going to choose again the guy that is running towards home. But and just putting it down to like it's the fielder's choice on where to throw. And if it's a throw to second, then it is, I say unambiguously, a throw to, like, nope, second base is where the play is. You got to let that other guy go. You aren't going to get it home to him.
You also have the split-second decision of, well, is it 1 out? Is it 0 outs? Is it 2 outs? If I throw it here on 1 out, do I try to go for the double play? Do I go for the guy at home? Like, it's more complicated than that.
It is, but
this is baseball. Time is meaningless.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, and that's like what I was talking about earlier about like why baseball works so well with this, because if that's like the most complicated situation we're encountering with a game, it's a complicated situation where there's like maybe 3 possible outcomes, you know?
Yep.
As opposed to like if I were trying to simulate basketball and it's like a basketball player can literally go in any direction and he could be trying to do any number of different things. It's like it's a fielder's choice, but the choice is usually made for him. It's called get the lead runner, you know? And obviously it's a little more complicated than that, but it's not a ton more complicated than that. I'm lucky that baseball is the game that I was drawn to for this, because if I were trying to do it for basketball, I would have lost my mind. Or hockey. I'm so impressed that you're able to do it with hockey.
That is something we talked about yesterday, is how hockey does not lend itself particularly well to...
Yeah, it's a fluid game. Fluid games are harder.
Absolutely. That's why baseball is such a good radio sport. And
I was
why
about to say that.
Yeah, and also like why it did so well in the 30s and the 20s and the 40s. And
yeah, it's why like American football is a terrific radio sport, because each play is a discrete thing. Like back when I was into football, man, I used to listen to so much football on the radio. It rules. Soccer on the radio is terrible.
I would argue that baseball is way better in a lot of ways because it's so linear and so many ways. Like you have to go to first, you have to go to second, you have to go to third, home. The ball's gonna be hit in a specific spot, but like between 9 people.
Yeah, it's great.
And
yeah, no,
it's gonna go where it goes.
Yeah, it's like a limited set of possibilities that produce an infinite amount of possible outcomes.
Exactly.
Baseball rules. This has been my TED Talk. Thank you for coming.
And that is, so first of all, perfect way to end it off right as the clock hits 9. If you want to say a few more, I do see, or there was a question about the Blank in Me books by Dan Guttam, and I'm just going to say the word Blaseball, and we can talk as long as anyone wants.
I am familiar with those books. I haven't read them. I was into Blaseball in a limited way. I loved the community and like checking on the Discord. I found the actual game kind of overwhelming. I loved the vibe of it, but also it was like a thing that demanded lots of looking at my phone when, like my whole life is about trying to spend less time looking at my phone. But Blaseball was amazing, and I'm so sad that it's gone. And I'm also sad that I was never able to like properly seed Deadball into Blaseball, because I feel like there's just so much natural overlap there.
Close.
Oh,
Like
you
as
got
soon as
talk.
I found out about it, I was like, I emailed those guys. I was like, I want to sponsor a season. How do I do this? And it didn't work.
You got to talk to
Um,
Kaz because his literal. I think it's his league. He literally had like the crazy stuff that goes on in Blazeball. He had an entire left side of the infield like incinerated by a fireball or something
love
like
that.
that.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And then I learned this for the first time last night. Jaylee keeping secrets from us. Jaylee was the radio broadcaster for the Kicks.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, he's talked about that before.
I just learned that.
It's the best. Yeah, we
when-
got superstars in here, man. I should go because I hear my kids thumping around, and their bedtime was an hour ago, so I need to go and relieve my wife. But thank you guys so much for talking. If you have any follow-up questions that come up, just ask me in the server or DM me or whatever, and I will answer any way I can.
Absolutely. It was really an awesome 2 hours having you here and just being
Thank you.
able
This
to
is so
chat
much
talk
fun.
and talk
You
about
guys are the
like
best.
anything and picking your brain and just whatever we happen to talk about. It was wonderful.
Great. Well, thank you. Let's do it again next year. I can't wait.
Absolutely.
We will. All right.
All right. Bye, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, and send me the link. I'll send it to my parents. They can watch this.
Yep. I'm dealing with all that probably tomorrow or maybe Monday.
Thank you. I appreciate it. No hurry.
Yep.
All right. Thank you. Bye.